TV1 in New York with Diane Sawyer and Forrest Sawyer.
Good evening. We are bringing you new information tonight, a week after the bombing in Oklahoma, about the shadowy origins of the now very visible militia movement in America. You'll learn about the hostilities that have been building for years, and you'll learn about the targets of
Exclusive tapes obtained by ABC News Nightline. The voices of emergency workers, firefighters, police, in the first moments after the worst terrorist attack in U.S. history.
Is there now a pill for passion?
I'll take a pill in the morning, a pill in the afternoon, and a pill at night.
I'm more sexually active than when I was 21.
A new field of drugs makes the promise.
It's definitely a growing field. I can see by the people that are coming to me. I mean, my practice has just been exploding.
They are called sex drugs. They're new, they're controversial, and some say they are dangerous.
And why do we think they're beautiful? Maybe it's because we have no choice.
The beauty may be in the eyes of the beholder, but the eyes of the beholder have been shaped by millions of years of evolution.
Genetically programmed to long for a certain look. An intriguing theory about the evolution of desire. What men and women really want.
Day one from TV1 in New York with Diane Sawyer and Forrest Sawyer.
Good evening. We are bringing you new information tonight, a week after the bombing in Oklahoma, about the shadowy origins of the now very visible militia movement in America. You'll learn about the hostilities that have been building for years, and you'll learn about the targets of some in the group. A wide spectrum of American citizens, from judges to forestry workers to federal agents, who found out months, even years ago, that they in particular were under a direct threat.
And now here are the latest developments in the investigation of the Oklahoma City bombing itself. Federal officials are now investigating the sister of Timothy McVeigh, Jennifer, who lives near Buffalo, New York. They want to know whether Jennifer may have had any knowledge of the bombing before it happened. Investigators still have not been able to identify the missing suspect known as John Doe number 2. One source says it is believed that John Doe number 2 has an East Coast accent. That source says tonight investigators are, quote, still in the trenches. There is no cavalry charge tonight. Our chief investigative correspondent, Brian Ross, has more on this story. Brian?
Well, that's certainly true, Forrest. The FBI is adding even more agents to the search for John Doe number 2, stepping up the hunt in both Kansas and in Arizona. And as the investigation broadens, taking agents into the strange, violent world of this country's extremist groups, there's a lot to be learned about a very ugly side of America.
White power!
Never liked a nigger in my life.
I hate Filipinos. I hate Mexicans. I hate them all.
Long before Oklahoma, the voices of hate had been heard across rural America.
One God, one race, one nation, Sieg Heil, and white power.
White power!
And throughout the 1980s, in a bizarre kind of spring festival, the voices of hate gathered once a year on a farm in central Michigan, just 90 miles from the now infamous town of Decker. Nazis, the Klan, white extremists, local farmers. A movement was being born, all brought together in Michigan by a man who died 3 years ago after spending a lifetime spreading hate. His name was Bob Miles.
I can only tell you that, like Johnny Appleseed, we have sowed the seed. And out there, these seeds we know will grow into apple trees and they'll bear fruit. Whether we see it or not, we know it's so. And we've done our job.
And sadly tonight, it's increasingly clear that Michigan farmer Bob Miles and others like him got what they wanted.
We're looking at the beginning of an insurrection.
Take a home! Take a home!
These people are Americans who did this.
How could they kill children? Please, these people have no problems killing children.
As the investigation of the Oklahoma City bombing now goes into its second week, authorities say two things are becoming clear. One, that this well-orchestrated attack on the federal government was put together by former members of the military who have ties to a secret underground militia. And two, that these are men who have inherited a long legacy of hate and bigotry.
There's a whole part of American history and a part of American culture that is just not dealt with. I mean, you know, that we don't know anything about. It's kind of hidden.
Author James Ridgway says today's funerals can be traced back to those spring hate festivals held by Bob Miles in Michigan, which Ridgway actually attended and first wrote about as a correspondent for New York's Village Voice.
All these different groups would come together to his farm, and they would talk, and they would plot strategy and talk about what they should do and so on. And the underlying fact of the political movement was that the federal government was taking away their rights, and it was encroaching, and was, you know, and then this racialist aspect was running through it.
And Ridgway says just below the surface is a core belief that only white people are covered by the United States Constitution.
And if you're a true white person, you can tell, because if you slap your cheek and you blush, you're white. If you don't blush, you might be a Jew, you might be a black, or you're some form of minority.
You mean like that?
Blood in the face.
And as the Nichols family farm in Decker and thousands of others ran into trouble with the banks, the voices of hate gained new listeners.
And who was behind the banks? The Jews. The International Jewish Communist Conspiracy.
People believe that?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of people still believe it. I mean, it's a very ingrained thing in large parts of America.
Including the military. In 1988, with no place for him on the family farm, Terry Nichols joined the Army, becoming the platoon leader of his company in basic training, and almost instantly making a new best friend, Timothy McVeigh of suburban Buffalo.
We are currently experiencing technical difficulties. Please stand by.
Really made a bond in Fort Benning. They really come together almost like two magnets drawn to each other.
Robin Littleton of Indianapolis was Tim McVeigh's roommate through much of the 4 years they served together in the Army. And Littleton is now helping FBI agents go through the photos of what was known as Charlie Company, in the belief that it was in the Army that Nichols and McVeigh formed a common bond and perhaps recruited others to join them in an attack on the federal government they once swore as soldiers to defend.
Tim was the perfect soldier, okay? The Army loved Tim McVeigh. He was a perfect parade soldier. I mean, the guy was an incredible soldier. Weapons knowledge, tactical experience in the field, outstanding.
We're taught two things, how to kill people and how to blow things up. I looked at McVeigh. I said, this is one hardcore mother. He didn't flinch. He walked out to that crowd that was calling him a baby killer and just stared stoically into it. And I said, they'll never bust this guy. They'll never break him apart.
Retired Army Colonel David Hackworth, one of the most decorated soldiers in American history, says today's military is a breeding ground for discontent with Washington.
What I have seen is a lot of anger against the administration, specifically the president, his wife, his administration, his pro-gay policy, his pro-women in combat policy.
In fact, there is a big effort to recruit former and active duty soldiers into the exclusive private. This is a copy of what is known as the Resistor, obtained by ABC News. It calls itself the official publication of the Special Forces Underground, published anonymously and secretly circulated in the military and on the Internet. One recent edition asking whether the U.S. Army would fire on U.S. citizens.
Well, it's part of this revolution. It's part of this information net, and it's moving much faster today because of the InfoNet and all the rest of it. And it's easy to permeate and get through a military base.
Should these kinds of things be permitted to be circulated inside the military?
Absolutely not. The military is about protecting the Constitution of this great land of ours, and those things are about how to blow up that Constitution.
McVeigh won a Bronze Star when Charlie Company saw action during the Gulf War.
In the military, everything moves in twos. I cover you, you cover me. His vehicle and my vehicle were as in pairs.
This is my platoon.
Robin Littleton says McVeigh later became bitter about the Army and quit once he failed to make the grade in Special Forces training.
I received a couple letters from Tim, just the regular mumbo-jumbo that you'd have in a letter, you know, until I received the last letter I never returned, which was a letter that was kind of spooky.
What made it spooky to you?
There was things mentioned in the letter, things like tear gas, an adapter to make an automatic weapon, a gas mask, actual military-issued ammunition.
And it was in the years after the Army that McVeigh and the two Nichols brothers began their connection to the extremists in Michigan who last year evolved into what they call a citizens militia.
But this is not a duck club. You know, these aren't hunters out, you know, wading through the glen and then taking target practice on the side. These are people who are organizing a political army.
ABC News consultant Leonard Zeskin is a civil rights investigator in Kansas City who monitors the activities of the private militias that Zeskin says now exist in more than 34 states.
Hello? They're roughly equivalent, I think, to the paramilitaries that floated around Germany in the period right after the First World War.
Ready on the firing line. May commence firing.
Once you form a large group of people who have weapons, some of them are going to decide, well, it's time to stop marching around in the muddy field and let's start shooting.
And to the republic for which it stands.
Officially, the militias in Michigan and Montana have denounced the Oklahoma City bombing and denied any connection to it. And what's shown on the many videotapes the militias distribute, as full of hate as they are about the government and federal law enforcement agents, the tapes always stop short of advocating violence.
It's time to wake up. It's time to stand up. It's time to speak up. It's time to once again inflame this country with a passion.
But even the leaders of the militia acknowledge there are underground cells over which no one has control.
Those people are still around out there. They are functioning underground.
My suspicion is that there will be a number of other suspects, but that the terror cell won't be any larger than 6, 7, 8 at the maximum.
And Zeskin says the way Terry Nichols set up his house in Harrington, Kansas as a weapons storehouse, and even the fact that McVeigh's getaway car had no license plate, fit exactly the way the militia underground operates and thinks.
Consistent with the rest of their set of ideas. They didn't have to go to the state bureau to get their license plate in order to drive down the highway. Why do they have to go to the beast system to get their right to drive? They get that right from God.
Tonight, with leads in the case dwindling, FBI agents are looking for additional suspects in 2 places. In the U.S. Army, where Timothy McVeigh served with great distinction, and in the secret private militias where McVeigh has also served.
I think I'm just surprised that the far right-wing activity hasn't happened before now. It's like a revolutionary action here to get rid of the federal government. You want to get them out of your state, and you want the federal government to shrink, to disappear, to get lost.
It's a revolution.
It is a revolution. I mean, people really don't seem to understand it. These are ideas which are being put into action. I've always taken them seriously. I don't think people who believe in these things are kooks. I don't think they're to be dismissed. I mean, Oklahoma City happened. It wasn't dreamt.
But Forrest, the fact is the FBI knows very little about these groups. Very little attention has been paid to them until now.
One of the questions that has to be answered, Brian, is whether the Oklahoma City bombing is actually going to escalate the problem, and I know that many people, even in the civilian militia, say it very well could.
That's the case. Many in the militia have come to believe the bombing was done by federal agents, not by anybody in their group.
Brian Ross, thank you very much, Brian. We'll be back in just a moment.
Coming up, if you represent the law, you may have a new job, watching your back. The new threats against men and women in uniform. And later, the dramatic voices of the Oklahoma City rescue, just moments after the bomb hit, when Day One continues.
You're looking for something different. Imagine the lush taste of paradise. Tropical passion. New from Crystal Light. Pink strawberry with a kiss of kiwi. Passion fruit with a splash of pineapple. Light, refreshing, and just 5 calories. If passion had a taste, this would be it. Tropical passion. New from Crystal Light.
At last,
a saga of romantic love.
You know what they say about love?
What?
I can't remember.
True wisdom.
I passed on a twisted chromosome.
And a miracle man who will blow you out of the water. James LeGros, Dylan McDermott, Quentin Tarantino, Nancy Travis, and James Belushi.
Go, let's go.
Destiny turns on the radio.
I was afraid this would happen.
Rated R. Starts Friday at theaters everywhere.
He's a soldier, a statesman, a politician.
Stay with it.
And now he's on the air with a talk radio audience stretching from coast to coast. Mike Gooding catches up with Oliver North on the air with Ollie Talk tonight at 11 on 13 News.
At Sharp, we have a full line of copiers that suit the needs of your business, no matter how big your business becomes. Call for your free interactive kit of copier solutions.
An ABC special presentation, the inside scoop on the hottest secrets, backstage beauty secrets from top fashion models, plus Barbie doll sexy secret past. And see how levitation really works, a magician's best kept secret. And all new More Secrets Revealed Saturday on ABC. The biggest movie events of the year are back-to-back here on ABC. Sunday at a special time, Clint Eastwood's biggest movie ever, Unforgiven. Then Monday, Kevin Costner, Whitney Houston, The Bodyguard. Unforgiven Sunday, The Bodyguard Monday. Both at special times on ABC.
Day one continues with Forrest Sawyer and Diane Sawyer.
Long before that bomb took all those lives in Oklahoma City, a surprising number of Americans already knew what it was to live in fear of domestic terrorism. They are federal agents, local judges, even forestry workers, people connected with government and law enforcement, all of them threatened by radicals who refuse to recognize the rule of law. John Hockenberry has the story.
This court has a common law citizen. This court has no jurisdiction over me, and I waive none of my rights.
Al Hamilton, allegedly a member of the Freeman militia in Montana, was in court yesterday, charged with a felony he claims is no crime in front of a judge he says has no authority over him.
You're blatantly and knowingly and willingly and wantingly going against the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Montana right here in front of all these people. And it's your job to arrest this man for treason.
He's charged with felony intimidation for chasing the police off his property with guns after they stopped his daughter for a traffic violation.
This was a vehicle registration situation, which I didn't feel was appropriate to get into a big gun battle over a registration problem. And my philosophy is, let's back out of there. Why in the hell get into a big shooting scrape and make the appropriate charges and the arrests at a later time when it can be effected safely and when things are a little calmer.
Arresting Mr. Hamilton later did not calm him down.
Not from this free citizen. You can collect her from the state of slaves all you want.
Mr. Hamilton, we're attempting to...
You cannot even give me a contempt of court because this is not a court.
He's no mere eccentric. Officials in Ravalli County take Mr. Hamilton very seriously. And they say it's hard to know what agency in the state of Montana could control armed militias who produce videos gleefully denouncing the authorities.
Watch out for martial law.
And talk like they are willing to go to war over everything from taxes to driver's licenses.
It's really hard to fathom how angry they are. I don't know where it's coming from.
Marty Bethel is a judge in Ravalli County. Ever since members of the Freeman militia wound up in court, her life has been a living hell.
I've received so many calls in the last 6 weeks or so telling me of impending doom. Don't come to Darby tonight for your session of court. You won't be leaving. Warnings from law enforcement that they've received what they feel is credible information that my home is going to be destroyed, us in it.
If I had been at the desk or if anybody else had been in that office, I'm convinced they would have been killed.
The Nevada office of Forest Ranger Guy Pence was targeted by bombers last month after weeks of threats from people who believe the federal government has no jurisdiction over the forests.
And it blew out all of this window here and shattered that glass inwardly as well as outwardly. There was glass scattered out around here.
We've had one of our ranger districts bombed.
Jack Ward Thomas is the head of the U.S. Forest Service, and he told Congress this week,
these are tense situations.
You need more resources to protect your people.
Well, Well, off the top of my head, I would say yes, and then I would turn around and say, what would I do with it? Basically, I cannot send armed people into the field with all of our people that are out there working.
Out west, for some people, the enemies of freedom carry a badge.
The ATF, the FBI, the DEA, and all these other armed government agencies.
Retired Army officer Dick Harold lives in Idaho. He's a member of a militia he claims is opposed to violence, but he says armed resistance to authority is something Washington brought on itself.
What about government terrorism? When are we going to put a stop to government terrorism? After all, as far as I'm concerned, the government, the federal government, started it.
The militia movement is a grassroots populist movement that...
Undersecretary of the Treasury Ron Noble testified before the Senate today.
Militias are groups of individuals who are fervently anti-gun control and anti-federal government. They band together to conduct paramilitary training, to acquire destructive devices, and to possess firearms, including, in some cases, illegal firearms.
We have people who are saying, you cannot arrest us because we outgun you.
Montana County Attorney John Bowman will tell you the story of militia members Leroy Schweitzer and Rodney Skirdall. They're holed up in this cabin in eastern Montana, defying a number of state arrest warrants.
They were threatening the lives of public officials and were promoting how to take those lives. They weren't just saying those people should be killed. They were promoting how to kill them.
And so why aren't they in custody?
The basic reason they're not arrested is we have a 5-man sheriff's department, including everybody, and they just have too many weapons.
We do not consider those groups to be militias. We consider them to be a gang of guys with guns.
Samuel Sherwood is the director of the U.S. Militia Association and has spent a lot of time in the last week distancing his organization from the bombing in Oklahoma City and other acts of violence. But he says the agenda of even the most extreme militia is simple.
These groups, as radical as their philosophy is, their only real desire is to be left alone.
But in Hamilton, Montana last month, it was ordinary citizens who held a rally to demand that they be left alone and to condemn the harassment of their public officials.
A letter has been sent to a local judge from an out-of-state person, supposedly on behalf of an organization he represents, stressing that court officials better change to be in accord with what he espouses and making innuendos of consequences involved.